So the Vision has finally broken up. I say that as if they've been running for a while. It's only been, I think I want to say about maybe 6 months, not even, on the whole deal. But now, kind of with Seth Rollins' injury coming out of that crazy match he had with Cody Rhodes at Crown Jewel, it does seem like, the dogs are barking because Braun Breaker was basically giving Paul and Bronson the ultimatum of staying with him or staying with Seth. And Seth's broken down and injured, so this is kind of the perfect move, I guess, moving forward to kind of legitimize Bronson and Braun. Obviously I had a lot of questions kind of going into the Vision, and especially with this feud that Seth was having with Cody right now for Crown Jewel, it did feel like the Brawns had to take a back seat and kind of feed with the scraps of like the Usos and Roman and whatever was kind of happening with that regard. But now that we're kind of full throttle with Braun and Bronson kind of being that legit heel stable, I hope that they can keep that momentum kind of carrying them into like maybe a world heavyweight title feud. I don't see either of the two kind of winning the title yet, just because I do think that it's pretty early, and I don't know if the steps for Breaker specifically there are earned yet completely. I do think now with this step over Seth and maybe a firm place, maybe in a finalist position in like some sort of world heavyweight tournament, we can get some legitimacy there for him chasing that title. Now that we've kind of had a heel kind of run with it, maybe we could have two faces as champs right now. We could kind of put it on CM Punk just to see where he runs with it, just to kind of have him kind of carrying Raw, maybe then having Braun and Bronson have a foil to kind of rally against in CM Punk now having the title, since there's like a power vacuum. Of course with Gunther maybe returning, he can kind of lay claim to that as well. There's a whole open kind of book now that's possible, maybe with even potential short title runs in like LA Knight or maybe another Uso run, just because of like the lack of presence surrounding the title now. It is a very interesting situation. It does suck for Seth, as he has kind of come off the heels of a really significant heel run, that kind of really started with that WrestleMania turn at 41, so it does kind of suck to see it kind of crumble a little bit with this, but it is a good story outcome. I think it actually is good that the trigger is pulled now on the eventual betrayal that a lot of people do see coming, just because of how predictable that the nature of everything kind of is. So it's like, instead of us just kind of waiting and them teasing it, I think kind of doing it now with the real life injury angle, not only adds a sense of like urgency to it, but the realism there too, in that does legitimize like the cutthroatness of Breaker's character and wanting to elevate himself, right? I think overall it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks, I think, finally, for the men's division, now that Seth Rollins won't be coming out basically giving these 20-minute promos, kind of just cheerleading the group and everything. There's going to be maybe a new narrative kind of formed along Breaker trying to grasp that upper mid-card totem pole now as almost a solo Sikoa type character, where he wants to acquire power and is very capable of doing so, but it's about maneuvering now like a top champion that you're given this position, right? I do think Bronson Reed is going to need a little he's awesome, he's a great wrestler and a great look, but I do think character wise, in terms of confidence, I feel like he can have a couple more reps with some like mid-card faces to kind of bolster his presence, maybe to get him more legitimacy, because I feel like Breaker had the tenure with the IC title and stuff like that, and had a really sizable chunk as a top, or not like a mid-level star on the main roster, whereas Bronson, once he really was starting to get going with injuring Seth and the tsunami wave, he got hurt, so I do think there needs to be some caught up momentum for him, and I do think the Roman win is a start with that, but I do want him to evolve beyond the tribal thief and stuff like that, just because he does need something for himself to have, so when he is beyond Roman in his feuding and other things, he has something of his own that can keep him or give him some longevity. I think in general it's a lot of upsides to Seth being kicked out of the faction now, instead of later. Maybe Becky will have something to say about it. Maybe there will be some ramifications with the whole AJ Lee thing, at some point with it. Who knows? But it is kind of crazy that once again, it seems like the Raw after the PLE was extremely fascinating and actually moving stuff story-wise, whereas the PLE does feel like, well, match to match, like bell to bell, we're having a great time. Narratively and stuff, it feels very filler. It's kind of interesting that we're kind of continuing that trend here after Crown Jewel with an explosive Raw, and will most likely be a pretty explosive SmackDown tonight. I mean, last week you had Aleister Black and Zelina Vega pair up, which is an awesome pairing just because not only the real life chemistry, but Zelina Vega is a great valet. She's a great wrestler and great on the mic, but I think she will boister Aleister Black's presence in such a way, that he kind of desperately needs. I think he obviously has the presence and aura, but I think when it comes to delivering on the mic, Zelina really has that oomph, and I think will be a really great addition and piece to Aleister Black's kind of whole shtick. So that should be really cool, and it kind of spices up the thing happening between him and Priest, because that was getting kind of stale. But overall, it's kind of interesting to see that the vision is now, no longer the Seth Rollins vision, but the Braun's and Paul's vision now, kind of. Let me know what you guys kind of think about that. I think it's new steps. It's going to be an interesting thing to kind of consider moving forward now that there's not like a really big top heel position in Raw, which is why I kind of think that Gunther will probably come back to kind of fill that role. It'd be weird if they do have a face champion now and it's not CM Punk, just because I don't see really anyone else besides maybe LA Knight running with the title that fans could really get behind and be excited to see go for it again. I think Jey Uso getting it a second time is too early. I think the story they're trying to brew, kind of with Roman's kind of corrupting him to being like a mini tribal chief, should be the path he gets to a second world heavyweight title. I don't think, artificially putting him on now and then maybe ramping that story out of nowhere would really serve the story they're trying to tell with that. They should play a jealousy angle, between Jimmy, Jay, and Roman at some point to really hammer everything down in the idea of success. Beyond that, best wishes go out to Seth and his recovery. He's always been a soldier, he's always trucked out with these injuries into big moments, like even up into 40 with how hurt he was and carrying that world heavyweight title in its initial run, and really building that thing up while being part of the biggest story probably ever in wrestling since the Attitude Era stuff, right? So it's always props to Seth, despite even the highs and lows. And I don't think the vision was the best stuff, but I do think like the CM Punk cash in, obviously, right? The Becky AJ Lee stuff was excellent, and I do think like the elevation of Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker into that upper card main event scene is huge and is a solid vision. Overall, I'd probably give the vision, like in its Seth iteration, probably like a C+ to a B-, just because I do think it was effective in what it wanted to do, and there was that initial surprise and potential and kind of everyone teaming up. Now, while the week to week wasn't the greatest thing in the world, I do think that getting to see a burgeoning and growing Raw upper card main event scene is a big positive, and the vision is kind of that hole that the Judgment Day back in its prime and the Bloodline kind of had filled before. I just do think that there need to be greater narrative hooks that would have kept people more interested in that post WrestleMania 41's crazy in shock and betrayal that Seth Rollins did. Unfortunately, just kind of like with the Cena heel turn, the moment itself that kind of kicked off the narrative point is the peak, and then it kind of goes downhill from there, unfortunately. But overall, I think it was effective in what it wanted to do. That finally get some time off to treat some injuries and stuff, and best wishes to him so he can come back fully stronger. Maybe there will be a whole storyline about him coming back, trying to reclaim that vision mantle, and that can now be a whole story that's told between Breaker and Seth, come 43, come the future, right? So let me know what you guys kind of think about the whole vision split, what it kind of means for the top men's Raw division, and what it's going to shake up now kind of moving forward.